They don't disrespect you by accident. They do it quietly, systematically, and most people never notice when it starts. Respect doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes. One look held too long. One boundary tested. One moment where you stayed silent and they took notes. Here's the part no one tells you. People don't treat you how you deserve. They treat you how you allow and how you signal without words. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago, not as philosophy, as pattern recognition. The real danger isn't open hostility. It's subtle familiarity, comfort without consequence, power shifting before you realize you've lost it. If you've ever felt ignored, talked over, dismissed, or quietly sidelined, this isn't about confidence. It's about perception. And once perception changes, everything else follows.
Disrespect doesn't start with words. It starts with observation. People are always watching, not consciously, not maliciously, but constantly. They scan for signals, tiny cues, how long you hold eye contact, how quickly you explain yourself, how often you soften your own statements. Most of this happens below awareness, yours and theirs. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The human brain is wired to test hierarchy before it offers respect. Not fairness, not morality, hierarchy. In any social space, work, family, friendships, there's an unspoken question being asked: who sets the tone here? And if no one clearly does, that role gets taken. Respect is rarely given up front. It's withheld until the mind feels certainty. Certainty about your boundaries, your reactions, your tolerance for pressure. When you hesitate, the system updates. When you over-explain, the system updates. When you laugh off something that shouldn't be laughed off, the system updates again. This isn't about confidence in the way people sell it. Confidence is visible, respect is inferred, and inference comes from consistency.
Machiavelli understood that power is not declared, it's assumed, based on behavior repeated over time. Think about the people who never get interrupted. They don't talk louder. They don't rush. They don't feel silence to relieve tension. Silence, when used correctly, unsettles people. It forces the other side to reveal themselves. Now look at the opposite. The person who is constantly easygoing, always flexible, always understanding. At first, they're liked. Then they're adjusted around. Then they're ignored. Not because they're weak, but because the mind categorizes them as non-threatening. And here's the part most people miss. Disrespect isn't hatred, it's discounting. Once someone mentally discounts you, your words weigh less. Your presence shrinks. Your absence goes unnoticed. This process is quiet, polite, invisible, which is why it works so well. By the time people feel disrespected, the decision was already made, long ago, based on patterns they didn't know they were broadcasting. And once that pattern sets in, reversing it becomes difficult. Not impossible, but costly. And that's where things start to get interesting.
People believe disrespect comes from arrogance, or jealousy, or insecurity. That's comforting, because it puts the problem outside of you. But that belief is wrong. Disrespect usually comes from clarity, or more accurately, from the lack of it. People don't push boundaries because they're cruel. They push because the boundary looks soft, unfinished, negotiable. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The traits society praises, being agreeable, understanding, patient, often invite subtle disrespect when they're misread. Not because kindness is weak, but because ambiguity is. When your reactions are inconsistent, people test again. When your standards shift depending on mood, they probe deeper. When you tolerate something once, the mind assumes it's allowed forever. This is how small moments compound. You answer a message too fast. You explain a decision that didn't need explaining. You justify a no instead of letting it stand. Each move seems harmless, even polite, but psychologically it sends a signal. This person can be negotiated with. and negotiation is where respect quietly erodes. Here's the flip most people never see.
The individuals who receive consistent respect aren't the nicest. They're the clearest. Clear reactions, clear standards, clear limits. They don't threaten. They don't warn. They don't announce boundaries. They let consequences speak. And that's what unsettles people. Because the human mind prefers predictability. It relaxes around structure. It respects what it can't easily manipulate. Now, consider this. Have you noticed how some people get respect even when they say very little? Even when they're not the most skilled? Not the most likable? That's not charisma. That's positioning. They move as if their time is scarce, as if their approval isn't guaranteed, as if engagement is a choice, not a reflex. Meanwhile, the person trying to be fair to everyone slowly loses leverage. They think respect comes from being understood, so they keep explaining. But explanation signals doubt, and doubt invites pressure. Here's the paradox. The more you try to prove you deserve respect, the less likely you are to receive it. Because respect isn't granted to those who ask, it's granted to those who appear unmoved by the outcome. Once people sense you need to be taken seriously, the dynamic shifts, and they feel it before they think it. Which raises a dangerous question. If disrespect isn't about aggression, if it's not about confidence, if it's not even about intention, then what exactly are people responding to? That answer changes everything.
If this feels familiar, it's not coincidence. You're noticing patterns most people ignore. The pauses, the reactions, the way power moves before anyone speaks. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every interaction starts to reveal intent. Every response exposes position. And what comes next explains why some people regain respect effortlessly, while others never get it back.
Power doesn't announce itself. It observes, then adjusts. In any group, there's a quiet sorting process happening. Who leads the pace? Who adapts? Who waits? The person who waits loses ground. Watch how dominance actually shows up. It's not aggression. It's initiative without apology. Someone makes a decision and doesn't scan the room for approval. Someone ends a conversation without over-explaining. Someone lets a message sit unanswered because they're not available on demand. These aren't tactics, they're signals. The mind reads them as leverage. Now look at common situations. At work, one person's ideas get challenged. Another person says less and gets accepted immediately. Same room, same stakes. The difference isn't intelligence, it's how much resistance their presence creates. Resistance forces respect. In social settings, notice who people adjust around, who gets interrupted and who doesn't, who people apologize to instinctively. These reactions aren't conscious, they're reflexive, because dominance lives in timing. Fast responses signal accessibility. Slow, deliberate responses signal control. And control changes behavior around you. Here's where it turns dangerous. Once people feel comfortable testing you, they escalate. A joke that goes a little too far. A favor assumed, not asked. A decision made for you. If there's no correction, not verbal, not emotional, not behavioral, the mind records it as permission. This is how disrespect compounds. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. Machiavelli warned that power lost through tolerance is rarely regained through explanation, because explanations lower your position even further. Think about confrontation. The most respected individuals don't argue often. When they do, it's brief, precise, unemotional. They don't defend their worth, they assume it, and others follow that assumption. Here's the part people resist hearing. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, they're not confused, they're calibrated. They've measured your response range and found it safe, which means restoring respect isn't about being louder or harsher or more confident. It's about disrupting the pattern they've grown comfortable with. Change the rhythm, change the availability, change the consequence. Because the moment the pattern breaks, the hierarchy recalculates, and that recalculation makes people uneasy. That unease is the doorway. But what most people do next is exactly what keeps them stuck. Authority isn't granted by position, it's granted by perception. And perception is shaped long before anyone decides how to treat you. The mind is lazy. It builds shortcuts. Once it categorizes you, it stops reevaluating unless something forces it to. That's why first impressions matter less than repeated impressions. What you tolerate consistently becomes your identity in other people's minds. Here's the mechanism most people never notice. The brain assigns weight to presence. Some people feel solid, others feel adjustable. Solid presence doesn't come from intensity, it comes from non-reactivity. When someone tries to provoke a response and gets none, their brain pauses. It searches for footing and finds none. That pause is respect forming. Now flip it. Every time you rush to clarify, rush to smooth tension, rush to be understood, you teach people how to move you. They learn your triggers, your pressure points, your need for approval. And once someone understands how to move you, they stop respecting you. Not consciously, instinctively. This is why intelligence alone doesn't protect you. In fact, it often works against you. Smart people over-explain. They anticipate objections. They fill silence with logic. But silence is power.
Silence forces projection, and people project upward when they feel uncertain. Think about the person in the room who speaks last, not because they're slow, but because they don't need to rush. Their words land heavier, because nothing about them feels urgent. Urgency signals dependence. Dependence collapses authority. Here's the darker layer. Respect isn't built on likability. It's built on predictable consequences. People don't need to like you to respect you. They need to know where the line is and that it doesn't move. Once a line moves once, the mind keeps testing. Not out of malice, out of curiosity. And curiosity, unchecked, turns into disregard. This is why reclaiming respect feels so hard. You're not fighting people. You're fighting their memory of you, their stored model, their expectations. To change that model, something must feel different, sharper, colder, more final. Not dramatic, just unmistakable. And when that shift happens, people don't argue, they adjust. But before that adjustment fully sets in, there's always a moment of resistance, a final test. And that's where most people fail, without realizing what just slipped through their hands.
Right here is where everything tightens. Because once people feel the shift, they don't submit, they test. One last push, one last boundary check, one quiet attempt to see if the old version of you is still there. What happens next decides whether respect locks in or disappears for good.
Disrespect doesn't just hurt pride, it rewires expectation. It teaches the world how to treat you without a single word, and most people never notice until it's too late. Every ignored comment, every overlooked idea, every boundary waved off quietly, it compounds. The danger isn't the disrespect itself, it's the pattern it forms in others' minds. People start seeing you as optional, not valuable, not authoritative, optional. And once that happens, the cost is hidden but real. Your ideas get passed over, your voice gets shortened, your absence goes unnoticed. Power leaks out, quietly, invisibly. The dark truth is simple. The world doesn't test everyone equally. It tests the uncertain, the ambiguous, the predictable in all the wrong ways. Now, consider the consequences. Someone can quietly dominate your environment, not with force, but with absence of consequence, with micro-adjustments, with the subtle manipulation of attention. They know exactly what to push, exactly how far, exactly how long before resistance becomes reaction.
And here's the cruel insight few admit. Once people learn your tolerance, they rarely unlearn it voluntarily. You can reclaim control, yes, but it's not about shouting louder or proving yourself. It's about reprogramming the pattern. Stop over-explaining. Stop justifying. Stop accommodating. Start observing. Start redirecting. Start letting absence and consequence carry the weight of authority. Every small change sends ripples. Every delay, every pause,
Every unbroken boundary recalibrates perception. And slowly, imperceptibly, the world learns. This person is not negotiable, not optional, not weak. That's the power of awareness, the power of subtle control, the power most people ignore until it's gone. And that awareness, once internalized, changes everything. It transforms how you move, how you speak, how you're seen, and how the world treats you. Disrespect stops being random. It becomes predictable. And when it's predictable, it can finally be controlled.
Here's the part most people will never admit. Respect isn't something you earn with effort. It's something you signal with presence, with consistency, with boundaries that never waver. The moment you stop reacting the way they expect, that's the moment perception shifts. The quietest pause, the smallest delay, the firmest no spoken without regret, these are the tools of unseen power. Disrespect loses its grip not through argument, not through persuasion, but through unwavering self-calibration, because the mind only respects what it cannot manipulate. So the next time someone tests you, silently or openly, remember, they're not the problem. The problem is the pattern you've allowed. Break it, shift it, own it. And when you do, notice how the world adjusts. Notice how attention tilts. Notice how influence realigns. You don't have to fight for respect. You just have to be the version of yourself they cannot discount. And that version is colder. It's quieter. It's unstoppable. If you're ready to step into that awareness, watch, absorb, and start applying it immediately. The world reacts differently when you become unmovable. And now, if you want to keep uncovering what others never see, stay with silent dominion. Because once you notice the rules, you can start bending them.